Hello everyone, my name is Bali Das. My previous name was Bolaji Rosiji. My friends call me Balaji, I prefer Balaji. And I am from West Africa. I grew up in Lagos State, even though my parents were from Ogun State. And here I am in Mayapur. I'm happy to be here, having a wonderful time at the 2017 Mayapur Festival. But before I got here, it was some long journey. It began around 1970, or even before 70, when I was just about 5 years old. So you do the math. And then my aunt, my father's younger sister, had a little statue, like a toy head of the deity from Venkateshwara, I think, Tirupati, the Balaji deity. And I used to play with this deity as a kid. And that must have been the beginning, subconsciously, but I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't know how important that deity was, and I didn't know the deity was called Balaji, just like I'm Bolaji. And that was how I first met, Krishna Consciousness. So it's incredible how so many things, in so many ways, Krishna is reaching out to people all over the world. Anyway, from there, I, went to school, both in West Africa, in Nigeria, and in the UK. I went to school in Essex, in a little town called Saffron Walden. And then intermittently, I would also school, particularly summer school, in l'École Internationale Européenne de Paris, which was just about 20 kilometers outside of Paris. And those were my formative years, really. And after that, I went on to Hertford House College, which was in Dorking, Surrey, where I studied mainly arts, okay? And it was around this period that I actually encountered devotees. But about 3 years before that, or 2 years before that, a very close friend of mine known as Tanya Woods. And Tanya, I'm hoping you see this, Tanya. She introduced me to this book, The Path of Perfection. Now, I didn't have a clue it was a Hare Krishna book. I don't know, maybe if it was, I might have felt a bit, uncomfortable, I don't know. But this was something that I could relate to, a path leading to perfection. And hey, I must have been about maybe 13 or 14, and I wanted to be perfect, whatever it took, okay? And in those days, people were interested in literature, people were interested in philosophy, people were inquisitive about where are we coming from and where are we going and what's the purpose of life. Today, that question rarely occurs. If you notice, people are so busy with the hustle and bustle of everyday life, okay? So that was my first encounter, Path of Perfection, and that book sold me out to Krishna Consciousness. It was bits and pieces from Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And then later that, I think about a year later, in the summer of that year, I was near the Harrods supermarket in London, and I encountered a devotee on Sankirtan. Now, I was so young, so she gave me a book and she asked for a donation, and I just dug in my pocket and I just gave her all I had because I was just so young. I didn't know you're not supposed to do that, right? So I just gave her all I had, and then I got a couple of books from her, and that was, that reading those books took me the next level. And from there, I went to Soho Street. I got the address from the back of the book. I went to Soho Street towards the end of the summer holidays. And I remember vividly arriving at the temple, okay? And I was just about to cross from one side of Soho Street onto the other side of Soho Street where we have the temple, when this devotee walks out of the temple with the dhoti and the big, huge tilak and the neck beads and clean shaven hair and everything. And I never seen a devotee before look like that. So I was just about to cross over to the other side, and I saw this guy coming out, and I said, "Hey, hang on a minute. I'm not sure if this is what I came to do." But then I had come so far to be, at Soho Street. So I just went across the road, went upstairs, and the first experience was this lady at the reception, and she had a whole box of sweets. And I think at that time, the temple was closed or something. So she said, "Hey, here's some sweets, And she said to me, "But you have to come back because it's not yet program time." And those sweets, I tell you, those sweets were so nice. And I think this is the importance of devotees sharing prasad and distributing in Food for Life sweets and all kinds of foodstuffs. Because we sometimes don't know how much they impact people. So this was a very nice sweet, of course. And I said, "Hey, whatever it takes, I'm coming back for some more of this." And I came back the same evening, and I met, I'm not sure who I met after that particular devotee, but I know I met Mother Jagatam sometime in my travails. I met Bhakta Stewart, he was then. Now we know him as Shyam Sundar Prabhu. So, and then the rest is history, of course. And this was, how I came into Krishna Consciousness. After my initial experience at the London temple, I just kept on coming thereafter because I somehow or the other, as a kid, I was a searcher. I remember that my father had a collection of not Eastern classics, of Western classics that featured philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, Xenophanes, and Pythagoras, and all of that. And I remember, spending time in his library as a kid, just reading those books, even though I didn't understand what they were talking about. There was just something pushing me that, you had to look for something higher than an everyday chore of life. So, then I had been into various religions. Of course, I was baptized as a Christian, so I was reading different Bibles, and I was interested in different kinds of thoughts and philosophies. So when I met Krishna Consciousness and Mother Jagatam and Shyam Sundar, the next thing was for me to try to tear it apart, And every day I'd go to the temple, I'd spend so much time just debating with the Mother Jagatam particularly, and I was really stubborn. I would be there with my very good friend at that time, Kevin Baldio Singh, and we would come to the temple together. We must have been about 14 then, and Mother Jagatam was so nice. Even though there was a Prabhupada disciple, she had such a busy schedule, one of the more senior devotees in the temple at that time. But every time we would show up at the temple, 2 black kids, nothing to offer, no donation to give anyone, she would take us up to her private quarters with all kinds of sweets and, whatever. She had all kinds of goodies up there. And she would spoil us. And then she would give us all the time in the world, answering all the questions that we had. So I didn't appreciate it then, actually. I just thought it was a normal thing, because if I had a question, you had better answer it. And she never once said she was too busy. It's really weird when I think about it now, and I compare to how we were received back then in 1983, I think, or 82, I can't remember. So, and I think that if not for her devotion, people like Prabhu Shyam Sundar, and then we had Bhagavad Das Bhakti Shastri, who was our temple president. We had Mahavishnu Swami, who hadn't taken sannyas yet at the time. He was amazing. I remember he was a bit ill at one point, and he had me standing on his foot. I think he had, some arthritic foot or something, and I I had to stand on his foot, as reluctant as I was. So, and then I remember that he would sleep on the couch. Every night he was sleeping on the couch in the prasadam room. And he was constantly chanting. There was no time from the point of taking prasad, to the point of going to wash his plate. He was constantly chanting. From being in bed, I would sleep on the floor by his side, and all I would hear before falling asleep was him murmuring Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Literally speaking, I'm not exaggerating here. And these experiences left indelible memories, in me as to what it is like to chant, how we should chant. And everyone was just wonderful, really. And everyone had time for you. So I think that it wasn't just that devotees satisfied my philosophical quest, but they were also forthcoming emotionally. And if not for that, I'm not sure I'd be a devotee today. Because I didn't even have the notion of doing some, good for the temple, bringing some donation or anything like that. I basically, was there just to find out and satisfy my curiosity. So I don't think that as a young devotee, I did a lot of the things that I should have done, in reciprocation. I was just a child that needed my questions answered. And they were answered. There was no point, no argument that I would bring. I would deliberately go look for things to say that devotees wouldn't be able to answer. And they answered all my questions, and that was it. At the end of the day, I just said, look, I have to surrender. I have to, start obeying, instructions like the regs. Giving up meat was a biggie. Not that it was difficult as such. It was just that I was dependent on my parents. But in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, I think I was able to do so. And then after a while, I just became a bit of maybe a fanatic Krishna devotee, actually, because at that point, all I knew was the temple. It was the new thing in my life. So I gave it all the time that I had, and my parents were getting worried at that time. I remember my dad had scheduled a meeting for us to meet with some people. I don't know if they were family friends or business associates. I don't know what it was. And I didn't even care. I just went to the temple at the appointed time, and he was so unhappy about that. But I'm thankful that my father was a really decent person, because there were so many transgressions on my part in that father-son relationship after I found Krishna Consciousness. So many things, responsibilities that I did not live up to. I just didn't care. Once I found Hare Krishna, that was it. But they were such good parents that they were able to live with that. So once I decided to be a devotee, the next thing was that everybody had to know about this new thing in my life. So when I went back to school, the only thing I couldn't do was to shave up. Otherwise, everything, it was all on me, I always had my neck bead on, always had Prabhupada's books with me, and always talking about Krishna Consciousness. And I remember that I used to take these cold showers in winter. I don't know, I must have thought that in order to be a proper devotee, you had to take freezing cold showers. And all my classmates would come in the shower and see, like, wow, he's taking a freezing cold shower. And I thought that you had to do that to be a yogi and to be a pure devotee, and then it was cool, but I'm not sure if I can take that now, honestly. I've been taking them pretty hot lately. So anyway, the next thing was my parents' concern, because at this point it was quite overwhelming. And so there was an arrangement made that, hey, look, this is something that has raised the concern of the family, and we all want to go and see your guru and try and talk things over. And so we got in the vehicle, And I didn't even know we were headed for the airport. And the next thing I knew was that I had police accompaniment. We were at, I believe, Gatwick Airport at that time. And my parents had been scared about my Hare Krishna involvement, that they basically had me sent to Central Africa, Republic of Congo, I believe, yeah, where there was no Hare Krishna at all. And that was when a whole new episode began, and they believed, of course, that this negative influence, had to be addressed. And if I had a nice association with my fellow Christian, or if you want, atheist actually, because at that time the Republic of Congo had an atheistic communist government in power. So it was a great opportunity they had created for me to preach like anything. And I was getting pamphlets from Paris. I was getting, books coming in from neighboring French-speaking Cameroon. And we were going on illegal Sankirtan on the streets of Congo. And there was just no, look, there is no stopping a teenager when he's made up his mind on this thing, So that was how it went. And, to cut a long story short, my parents later understood that, look, there's not much that can be done about this. They would just have to live with me being a devotee. And I'm talking about after several court cases and after several family meetings and meetings with temple authorities. Eventually, it was a battle that my parents could not win, even though I did spend several years working with my father after that time. So I would say that the most striking thing was that something as profound, as vast, something as encyclopedic as Krishna Consciousness actually existed, and no one knew about it. That was very striking. So when I found it, it was like I found the gem that I've been looking for all my life. And it's changed everything. And quite frankly, I can't imagine living without Krishna Consciousness now. And you know what? We're now in 2017. If a devotee had approached me today, introducing me to Hare Krishna books and Krishna Conscious philosophy, I'm not sure if I would have responded. I'm not sure if I would, because the pace of life today is such that no one has time for anything. Most of us do not know that the most important thing in our lives is what's going to happen when we leave this life. We don't understand that, because this life is only worth about, 80 years, 100 years? It's how I see things, sometimes a bit mathematical, even though I suck at maths, Whereas the hereafter, the lifespan is 1 trillion years to the power of 1 trillion years to the power of 1 trillion years indefinitely. So when you think about that, it deserves attention. It deserves us to explore philosophy, to explore the Bhagavad Gita and find out what does Lord Krishna, the ultimate authority, say about how we should lead our lives today and how we can attain an eternal, wonderful association in His abode.